Let's look at one categorical and one quantitative variable on a spreadsheet. So a typical thing we do with this situation is look at a box plot, which uses the 5-number summary. So let's review how to do a 5-number summary on a spreadsheet. Minimum value, which could be Q0 or percentile P0. We'll just use the minimum one. And then we just select the relevant data. And here I only want the females first. So I'm just going to go down to the last female. I think there were 130 of those. Nope, 104. And then I'm just going to grab that range, copy it because I'm going to reuse it. Quartile equals quartile. And on Excel, we would use that inclusive quartile is the same as quartile on Google Sheets. I recommend Google Sheets. There's my data, and I want the first quartile. Median could be the second quartile, or we could use the median command. And data for females, Q3, again, quartile command, or quartile inclusive, which means include the endpoints. Data, quartile 3, and the max, which could be considered the fourth quartile, the place that marks 4 quarters, 100% of the data is at or below that point. Or we could just use the max. And data range. All right, so there's the female. So they have a pretty wide range from 3 to 10, so the range would be 7. Males, similar thing, but I just have to get the male range of data. I'm just going to again copy that so I don't have to keep highlighting the data. And then quartile 1, median, quartile 3, oops, wrong one. And with the quartile command, don't forget to tell it which quartile you want, otherwise it'll yell at you. And max. All right, so here's the standard. Some observations we can make on this is, again, the females have a much wider range. We could include the range in here if we wanted to, by just taking the min and the max and subtracting them. Max minus min. IQR would be another measure of spread we can include here, which would just be Q3 minus Q1. And then since we're just pulling from the data above the summaries, I can just fill that over. It's the same calculation for males and females. So they have the same interquartile range, right? Middle 50% of the data is the same for each group. However, the females have a much wider range, more variation when we look at the range. If we wanted to look at other variations, we would have to separate out the mean and the standard deviation. So those are pretty different than this. So let's get the mean and the STD for each of them. Mean is average. And then select our range for females. And I'll reuse that for the standard deviation. And for the standard deviation, the stdev command gives us the standard deviation for a sample, but here I like to be a little more cautious and specifically say, hey, this is a sample, not a population. Otherwise, we get a different number. Okay. I can't fill those across because they're different calculations, so I have to redo that for both male mean and male standard deviation. Average, find the males. Make sure you're in the right cell. And again, I'll just copy that range, Control-C, and do the standard deviation for the sample. Now, I can't directly compare the standard deviations. Notice the means are pretty similar. Standard deviations are a bit different, but they're not directly comparable, the standard deviations, because the means aren't exactly the same, even though they're close. So we have to do another calculation here, which is called the coefficient of variation. And that's just the standard deviation divided by the mean. So what's the spread based on the center? So calculate standard deviation over mean, and we usually display that as a percentage. So percent spread based on the mean. So females is 19.73, males is 15. So that just shows us that kind of the difference here, but related to the centers are slightly different. So that's important. So I can see through several measurements the range and the coefficient of variation. Remember, you can't compare two standard deviations if the means aren't identical. These are close but not identical, so coefficient of variation is more appropriate to compare the two. There's a couple measurements there that show there's more spread, more variation in the female data than the male data. Thanks for playing. Bye-bye.